when I hear like people, use the La La Land for a wedding or maybe a kid plays it at a recital, or people tell me that like it got them through something in high school, or it meant something to them, or it helped them with a breakup or whatever, that is the most meaningful, and that reminds me why we work so hard on these movies. So I love that. It's honestly like the most gratifying thing that comes out of all of this, is when I hear from people who, the music actually means something to them.
2 options. You either follow my rules or follow my rules. Capiche?
Thank you.
I can do it a different way.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I want to jump back to the halls of Harvard University in Boston, where you met a filmmaker, and his name was Damien Chazelle. And you guys have established, I think, one of the most, I'm going to use the word iconic collaborations in Hollywood, that is still so fruitful, clearly from Babylon. So I'm just curious, when you met Damien, what was it about both of you in terms of your personalities, but also your love for cinema, that sort of brought you together?
Thank you to my very, very good friend, Damien. I'm so glad I met you.
Well, we met originally by starting a band together. So our first interactions were all about being in a pop rock 5-piece band. I knew he was studying film. I was studying music, definitely thinking about scoring films. And then it was, as things went on, sophomore year, we became roommates, sharing a bedroom, 2 beds, 2 desks. We were just like cooped up the whole time. And that's when I really remember understanding his ambitions and him hearing about what I wanted to do with music, and starting to really talk about how we can put our things together, his movies, my music. And so that's when that really got started.
Damien, simply from his filmmaking, is so visionary and also very visual. So like, could you tell at the time that you met him that there was that much going on up there in terms of his mind as a filmmaker?
Well, I remember reading the screenplays he was writing, as like a 19-year-old, and being very impressed by them. I knew he had like an encyclopedic knowledge of movies. I didn't get to see that as much as I do now. I hear the way he talks to the cinematographer or other people, and he'll reference like an angle from a movie from like the 60s that I've never even heard of. It's like he knows every shot from every movie that's ever existed. So it's like, I guess I saw signs of his deep knowledge in movies. He certainly introduced me to movies that became very important to me, very important to us, like some of those French musicals from the 60s, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, Young Girls of Rochefort, other new wave cinema, The 400 Blows. He was introducing me to a lot. So I definitely recognized and respected he had a much deeper knowledge of film than I did. I don't think I saw how like ridiculous it was and encyclopedic it was until I got to actually see him make movies a little bit later. But no, he was definitely an aficionado. I grew up with like loving some movies, being very, very fond of some movies and some scores that definitely stuck with me, but I was not like the film buff. Have never been the way that he is.
So I want to jump to your first film, Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench. And I thought it was a very interesting revelation. I recently heard an interview that you did with the Score podcast, where you talked about the experience of sending in the original demo. And it was just an export through, I think it was like Finale. And you got like a very stark response from Robert Kraft, but who clearly saw the potential in both of you as this filmmaker-composer duo, and the brilliant musicality that you had. He clearly saw that. So can you talk just a bit about what it was like working on the first feature with Damien, and also how that links together with La La Land going forward?
As you're referencing, when I sent music off to Robert, who was he was head of music at Fox at the time, I was really proud of him. Like, hey, look at this music we're doing. And he was basically like, it's got to sound a lot more professional than this. Like, never send something like this to somebody like me. And it was, I mean, he was right. It was It was the kind of like slap I needed at the time, because I was really resisting. Part of it's because the school I went to and how they taught music, and part of it was just, I don't know, my personality. I was like really resisting learning the technological side of it. I was like, I'm going to compose on a piano and I'm going to orchestrate it on paper and then notate it in Finale, and that's it. Then we record it. And we got through Guy and Madeline that way. Damien is a musician and he's very imaginative, and he was very lenient in terms of the kind of demos he was willing to accept. I also don't think he knew the difference. Neither of us had done anything, made anything. So nobody had showed him how great a mock-up can be. I think if he had realized that, he would have been like, oh, you got to do that. Like, I'm not going to listen to this crap anymore. So, but he didn't realize that that was possible. I didn't realize that I should be doing it. So yeah, I was working in a very kind of old school way with some very, very limited technology. And I remember like what a crash course it was getting to. So we raised just enough money. By raise, I mean basically, you know, Kickstarter, like beg friends and family for just enough money for one session with the Bratislava Symphony, a 4-hour session, 1 4-hour session, to do all the songs and all the score in that movie. Normally you'd have, I mean, if you're making a Hollywood movie and you have a real budget, you'd have days to do that. Here we had a single session, which means we basically got 2 takes of everything, maybe 3 takes of everything. First take was a straight sight reading. Second take, we either had to keep it or sometimes we got a third take, and that was it. And it was the first time that my orchestrations were ever played. I had been orchestrating on paper and then Finale, and like we referenced, Finale gives you like a little, you know, a very, very basic, I think it's gotten better over the years, but a very, very basic MIDI sort of representation of what it's going to sound like, but very primitive compared to a real mock-up, or certainly what it'll sound like with a real orchestra. So this was the first time that, not just for these cues, but really this was the first time in my life really that any of my music that I'd orchestrated got actually played. So I was learning like on the fly what worked, what didn't work. I was making so many mistakes, so many just like dumb mistakes with range. Or I had read in my orchestration books, like this is the lowest note and this is the highest note for an instrument, but I had no experience with like doing it practically. So even though the book said, yes, a horn can go up to that note, I wasn't thinking of like, should you go up to that note? Should you jump up to that note? Should you go up to that note with fast material? Like I wasn't thinking about what was really practical. I wasn't thinking about giving the musicians chances to breathe. Like I was just making lots of mistakes because I had never had my music played by real musicians. So we got to this session where you had no time to fix anything, no time to adjust. And I'm like, my music is only kind of half working. So it was absolutely thrilling. Absolutely thrilling. I remember I was like literally jumping on my toes and the engineers were laughing at me. I was in the booth bouncing on my feet and the engineers were kind of snickering because like I was just having so much fun. But it was also very stressful in terms of things not working. And, you know, on the second take, a player saying, hey, can I play this down an octave? And saying, yeah, we have no time, just do it.
Justin and I, very early on, started talking about what it would be like to make a musical together. He wrote the music for La La Land, he wrote the music for Whiplash, and he'll write the music for anything I ever do.
The first music I composed for the movie was actually the theme of the movie. I wanted material that could unfold on a larger scale and throughout the entire movie.
Every single time that you get in front of an orchestra, and you're often, I think, in the control room, because you know you're basically hearing what is happening in the room and you have a conductor, but is it the same every time the orchestra plays where you have that like, wow, that's my music, and those are all those people bringing it to life in that way?
Yeah, it's always thrilling. Things changed on First Man. That was the first score where I started conducting. So La La Land, I was in the booth. First Man, I conducted. Babylon, I conducted. I think going forward, I'll want to be out there conducting. It's a very different experience. You know, even if you can conduct the booth, there are definitely advantages to being in the booth. You're hearing what the microphones are actually capturing. You're also just, you know, conducting, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to control. There's a monitor with bars and beats, and there are musicians all around you, and there's just a lot. So to be able to do all of that and manage all of that and conduct all of that and also hear everything you need to hear in the booth, you can just focus on what you're hearing. So there are advantages to being in the booth. But I love conducting, and that's what I think the way I want to do it. But it's still thrilling to hear it come to life. I would say I've definitely learned from my mistakes, corrected some of the problems. I was still making some of the problems. La La Land, I still made breathing problems. I still notated stuff for the brass in Someone in the Crowd that had no places to breathe. So we had to get things in chunks, which you can do in the studio. Now, when I go out and do it live, it's, we have to make adjustments so that things are more playable live. But I've whittled down the number of mistakes I make. I still do stupid things all the time and try to just like be self-deprecating about it and make a joke in front of the musicians like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot for doing that. And hopefully people laugh.
Orchestration is my favorite part of the process, finding those colors using the orchestra. Whether I was making it melancholy or playful.
Justin wrote such beautiful music, and it's something that people are always going to talk about and remember.
But what is so amazing about this, and I think so inspiring for really creatives in general, but also for film composers and aspiring film composers, is the idea that you can have a musician or a composer who's won an Oscar and he's still learning every single time he gets in the studio. Every single time is a new experience, and there's always things to to learn from.
100%. I mean, just my personality is so often, for better or worse, focused on the things I do wrong, not the things I do right. So when I go back and listen to past things, when I listen to La La Land, I'm very proud of it. Like I said, it's very meaningful, like what that is and what it means. But I do hear a lot of things that I wish I did differently. Same with First Man, same with Babylon. Everything I hear, I'm like, oh, if I could just get back into the studio and just do that differently or mix it differently or whatever. I'm trying to always focus on what I can do better. And I'm trying to always learn.
Some other girl and guy would love this swirling sky, but there's only you and I, and we've got no shot. This could never be.
And not just in the studio, certainly there's still a learning curve in the studio. Hopefully there always will be, getting better at sessions, getting better at not just conducting, but just managing sessions and gathering everything you need. I mean, that was something I started to think a lot more about on Babylon, is the way that a director like Damien gathers what he needs on set. I need, before we move on, I need to get that line closer because I know I'm going to want that. That's something that I've developed from score to score and became a bigger part of what I do on Babylon. Just really thinking about getting all what I'm going to need for the mix, gathering it, making sure I have it. But not just the studio. I mean, I still read my orchestration texts. I still watch a lot of YouTube videos. You can learn anything from YouTube, watch a lot of stuff. I mean, there are huge areas that I never learned, and I'm really trying to catch up. Anything on the electronic side, anything on the production side. Like I said, I resisted it for a while, and then I tried to learn it, and now I use Logic and I use virtual instruments and I use plugins and I do some production stuff, but I'm still very, very much behind the curve on that. So I watch things from artists I admire, or some of those, there are certain like series of videos where they'll like break down what's in a track, a pop music track or whatever, a film score track, and you'll get to see all the layers and what actually went in there. And I love those kind of things. I love just even geekier stuff on plugins, and I'm always just trying to learn. And I hope I never stop learning, because I never want to feel like, oh, I'm good and I know what I'm doing, I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. I want to keep expanding my abilities and trying new things and getting better in new areas.
I'm part of Schaefer's top jazz orchestra. It's the best music school in the country.
The key is to just relax. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about what the other guys are thinking. You're here for a reason. Have fun. 5, 6, and.
I want to be great.
And you're not.
I remember hearing that Whiplash for you and Damien was sort of, it's interesting, almost like a bridging project between Guy and Madeline and La La Land, because basically you get this call from an executive who really likes what you did on that first film, but sees potential in something bigger and grander. What was it like on the back end of Whiplash, Because obviously that like shook the planet, that movie shook the planet. And it's the first film that I think put both of you on the radar. So did things feel like they changed after Whiplash for both of you?
Well, you know, that executive, I think you're talking about, Matt Pluff, who saw Guy and Madeline at Tribeca Film Festival, and he said, let's do something bigger, something a little, I mean, that was a no budget student film, so bigger didn't mean big, it just meant bigger than that. But you know, we started developing La La Land at that time. We actually developed La La Land for about a year before Whiplash. I don't know if you knew that part of it, but Matt, so yeah, he said, let's do a bigger musical. So we started developing a very small version of what became La La Land, did that for about a year, couldn't get it made. That was dead. Then we went on to make Whiplash. Then La La Land came back to life after Whiplash. But in terms of actually making Whiplash, I mean, it was such a crash course. Making a movie with professionals surrounded by real producers, real mixers, real everything. It was definitely a new world. I was like making so many mistakes, not just musical mistakes. I mean, just like collaborative mistakes, not understanding how the workflow is supposed to be, not understanding my role on a dub stage, not understanding anything. So that was totally getting thrown into the deep end. Afterwards, yeah, just a great feeling to see the movie land the way it did, to make something that was just exciting to get into Sundance in the first place, and then to have it be released in theaters, to have it nominated for awards, not me, but to have the movie out there and winning things. It was just like, it was very unexpected, and it was very kind of shocking.
Look, I don't really know how... I see you in here a lot, and I think that you're really pretty, and would you want to go out with me? Ever?
Please go away.
Oh my
Please
God.
get out.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with you.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. And moving on to La La Land, I think one of my favorite aspects of La La Land that you talk about quite often, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about, is like the way that, first of all, like all the minor seconds and all the seventh chords, and the way that you bring out that like very beautiful, relatable, reflective harmony all throughout that movie. Can you talk just a bit about your approach harmonically?
Yeah. Well, something that Damien and I have always seen eye to eye on is we like things that aren't 100% happy or 100% sad. If it's just 100% happy, joy, 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 it feels cheesy to us. And if it's just melodrama, sad, 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 it feels cheesy to us. So we like things that are a little bit of both, kind of like life. That's what life is. Love is great, and it's also painful. You know, death is obviously painful, but there's a beauty in everything. Like life is bittersweet. Life is both things. And so we like chord compositions and chord progressions that constantly go back and forth between cadencing and major and minor. That's a sort of very basic happy sad sort of trick. When we cadence in major, it depends on obviously the project, the world you're working in, but in the case of La La Land, every major cadence had a major seventh pretty much, which kind of cuts against the majorness. It just adds a little bit of dissonance. A major seventh is a dissonance. It's a very controlled dissonance, but it is a dissonance. So it just kind of like it sours it a little bit. Basically, it sours the sweetness a little bit. That prevents it from being too simple happy. There's a lot of suspensions, a lot of the minor second. I don't know.
City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, there's so much that I can't see.
One thing that I did a lot in the orchestration that people kept asking me if it was a mistake until they realized that it's not a mistake. It was just what I was doing. Was whenever I had like woodwind runs, like damn, you use those a lot to like punctuate different moments, different like transitions in the songs and whatnot. I would always put at least 2 flutes and sometimes 2 flutes and 2 clarinets, maybe sometimes an oboe. I would put woodwinds a second apart. Let's say we're in the key of G, and as glue into another section, you might have a run up to a G, up to the root, up to the tonic. You know what I mean? Most of the time, I would say in most people's stuff, they would have unison or octaves all running to the G. And I would always have a run to the G, and then I would have another scale with whatever 16ths, 30 seconds, tuplets, whatever it is, the same rhythm, the same, but I would have it F sharp to F sharp or whatever, and I would have it would be like a little cluster, a little crunch, so the run would be a little, and I would always like cluster the woodwinds, and I would try to emphasize, I would have more weight, definitely more weight on the running up to the root, but just a little bit on a second apart, and people would always think that I just like wrote it wrong or transposed it wrong or forgot that clarinets are in B flat or something like that. They would think that I made a mistake, and I would always have to say, no, I want it to be a little sour. That's how I want to chart it. I want to chart these, people landing on a G and an F sharp at the same time, and not even spreading them. Like when I talk about cadencing at least I'll spread out the major seventh. At least I'll spread out the major seventh from the other voices in the chord. But when I'm doing these runs, it's really just yeah.
How you did the brilliant modulation in Audition, because I swear to God, every time it goes to that A major, I think, it is just unbeliable. Especially like, yeah.
Oh, when you go to A?
Oh.
And that's why they need us. So bring on the rebels, the ripples from pebbles, the painters and poets and plays. And here's to the fools.
I know that. Okay, so it was all in F, and then I know that bridge section was, we kind of came up with that on the fly. So we were having, for the most part, the music was all written, and then Pasek and Paul would write the lyrics, and they were in New York, so sometimes they were doing it from there. There was one point where they came to LA and they got an Airbnb, and they were just like hunkered down in this house working, and we met with them, and I remember like Damien was there and he was working with them. I was just sitting around because it was always Damien working with them on the words at that point. So I was just there in case anything musically came up. And at one point, they, for whatever narrative reason, they're like, we could use a bridge. Either Damien or Benj and Justin asked for it. So that's where on the fly, I had to sort of work out that section. That was all like, that was not planned. So I came up with that. And then, and then I think it was like that day that I kind of worked out the transition. I forget when I worked out the transition, but I remember it was all about, normally I wouldn't do that, but there was something about the like, that line, being able to use the E, the seventh, I don't know, getting to start on the E and end on the E.
The La La Land soundtrack has basically been played over and over again at weddings. People have fallen in love with it. There's covers everywhere. So I wanted to ask you, out of all the soundtracks that you've worked on, what are a couple pieces of music that for you have remained super, super personal? Obviously everything came from you, came from here, but what are a couple pieces of music that still have that impact on you?
The music that means the most to me, I really love Audition, The Fools Who Dream from La La Land. I think that was always maybe my most favorite song. It's hard to kind of pick a favorite. They're all kind of like, you know, my children, I guess, in a way, but that one just felt so right. Working right here, actually, right at that piano, like coming up with the tune for it and building that composition. I don't know, the way that it came out of me and the way that Emma sings it and the orchestration and the way it all works together. I really, really love that song. Engagement Party from La La Land. That's another piece that I really, really love. And that's a piece I've seen played at some recitals and weddings. And like I said, that's just means so much to me. It's hard to describe how good that makes me feel when I see like the music can be a part of somebody's life like that.
Man, it's happy to be here.
Excellent.
Very easy to work with, man.
Okay. And you're gonna play the set list.
Happy to. Even though I don't think anyone cares what I play, but
yeah. Well, if by anyone you mean anyone other than me, that would be correct. I care, and I don't want to hear the free jazz.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with those two pieces.
Because Audition clearly has such, it's almost like it has a theme for the film, but it also has a theme for the artists that are creating the film too. Because all of you are pursuing this life in Hollywood. You're creating art, you're telling stories, and you and Damien together have had just a ridiculous, remarkable journey over the last decade. So for you, does Audition also like link into your own personal journey as an artist and as a creative in Hollywood?
Absolutely. And I think all of Damien's projects speak to me on some level, and specifically as being an artist. You know, Whiplash is about the sacrifice and the pain that sometimes we go through, and that I personally go through and have felt to do what I do and to be good at it. And Audition, the next movie, Audition, is kind of the equally, you know, bittersweet, well, maybe definitely less brutal than that theme in Whiplash, but bittersweet in the sense that, you know, you realize like it's about how much insanity it takes to do what we do, and how you just have to have blind faith in yourself and in what you're making. And I definitely related to that theme a lot. The lyrics there and the theme Damien had for that song, and then the beautiful words that Pasek and Paul wrote to that song. I relate to that a lot. And then Babylon, I don't know, I don't want to jump ahead, maybe you're going to get there, but I definitely relate to the ideas in Babylon of like some of the themes in that movie are like how we have our moments and then time moves on, and we can't take for granted being a part of art or being a part of this industry. And every movie we make could be our last one. Every score I do could be my last one. I honestly approach it like that. And so the idea of things will move on and people will, you know, I won't be a part of it at some point, but I get to work really, really hard and make things that I care about. And so it's almost like those three movies are almost like the whole journey of like, you know, the beginning, the fighting to get in, the being a part of it, and then the, you know, maybe looking back and looking back at what you did and realizing that you got to be a part of something.
Right. And Babylon certainly feels like the natural culmination of the full experience of those past films coming together.
Yeah.
So my last question on La La Land, because I want to jump to Babylon, but on La La Land, one of my favorite things about it, one of the things I love so much, is how in the last 15 minutes of the movie, you bring all of your musical ideas together in one beautiful, it almost reminds me of like an overture to a classic musical, because you're blending in and out, and it's the same with Damien's visuals as well, going in and out of all of those scenes, and you see this alternate storyline, which is so bittersweet and beautiful.
The epilogue was like the last thing that I wrote and orchestrated. So by that point I kind of had all the songs locked. Kind of funny Easter egg for people, like there was a song, and there was one big song that got cut from the movie called La La Land. There was a title song called La La Land. And we never shot it. It was demoed. We were prepping the movie for it. We ended up cutting it before we shot the movie, but I had already written and orchestrated fully in finale the epilogue. So I had incorporated a lot of this title song into the epilogue, that it's like the one piece of material that doesn't come from something. There's clearly Another Day of Sun and someone in the crowd and audition, and they're all in there, but there's material from this song that's not in the movie. So it's kind of a funny thing. But I remember I started that. It was a piano demo. It was all like an 8 minute, however many long it was, piano demo.
And did it have all of like the tempo changes, like when it jumps to the cafe and all that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, like it would da 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 da.
Yeah. Right.
I did the walking bass. I did it all. I even layered a few layers of piano to get it to sound like, you know, like it would be an orchestra. And then one of the coolest things is we had so much back and forth with Damien, because like I said, he is such a visual filmmaker, and he has every single shot and every timing in his head before we make a movie. And this is true for La La Land, for Babylon, for everything we do. During that development phase, I'm just asking him lots of questions, like, is this too long? Is this too short? And he's like, oh, I need like 4 more seconds on this, because he knows what those shots are going to be. So I structured this piano demo over lots and lots of back and forths with Damien, and then he recorded his voice over it, talking us through every little beat of it. Okay, now Mia walks behind the scrim. Now the light comes up. Now we see her silhouette. Now she sings the piece. People get up, they applaud. She comes out from behind the scrim. The camera pulls back. We're on a globe. The globe spins. I mean, he had every shot, every timing of it. So I have this great, like, it's a piece of, you know, memorabilia or whatever you call it that I just love, where it's my piano demo and it's Damien talking over the entire thing. We should release it at some point.
You really should. That needs to be like on the 10-year anniversary or whatever.
And the Oscar goes to Justin Hurwitz, La La Land.
This is the first Oscar win and 3rd nomination this year for Justin Hurwitz.
Jumping ahead to First Man, I think that it's interesting because obviously La La Land is a big, beautiful spectacle of a movie, but at the same time, First Man almost feels, even though you're going to space, it almost feels more intimate, because it's all based around this one man, and you have the Claire Foy and Ryan Gosling, you know, it's so intimate. So can you talk about what it was like jumping from La La Land to tackling, you know, this much larger but also maybe smaller story?
Yeah. I mean, it started with, again, reading the script and then trying to get inside Damien's head of what he wanted to feel. It always starts with, I want to know some words that describe what he wants to feel. So Damien was talking about grief, loneliness. I remember he had a phrase. It was something like grief that extends through the cosmos. I think that's what he described it as. Pain that extends through the cosmos, something like that. So I had to sort of try to find what that would sound like. Again, always starting here, looking for those main themes, which the you know.
Oh, the theremin theme. Yeah. Landing.
Those two pieces of material were kind of the first two. Again, many ideas before we came to those. But once we found those, we're like, okay, those are the building blocks. And then something that had never been so much of a part of our process is instrumentation. You know, with La La Land, we spent a lot of time on the tunes, but we knew with the instrumentation, it was going to be lush orchestra, jazz rhythm section, that sort of Michel Legrand sort of palette, with other colors, you know. But this was really more of an exploration, more of just a question, like, what is it? So that's where we played around with a lot of things before we fell into the theremin as a lead instrument, before we came into the idea of strings, violins, violas, cellos, basses put through a rotor cabinet to create that shaky sort of quivering sound in the strings, modular synths and other things. It took a lot. It took some playing around with this stuff, you know, in demo land before we came to those ideas that we could then implement in the real world.
I think it's really cool too how, you know, Damien visually was changing the format of the film throughout the movie, and it also felt like your music was evolving in that way, because at the beginning it's so like harp driven and it feels so small and intimate, and then by the time you're going up and you have, of course, the sequence, the landing sequence, it just gets broader and more soaring.
Yeah, and we bring together the themes. It's and we kind of do a version of this in all of our movies, but in that movie you had the tune da do 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 do, and then you have that ostinato ba ba do do ba do do ba do do, and in that landing cue, it's the first time that they kind of come together and they fuse, and the ostinato becomes the pulse of it, and then the melody goes over the top and it kind of comes together. So that was there was a sort of an architecture we had in mind how that would work across the score. And then the end credits brings together the third theme. So then the third theme is there's kind of a work theme. We use it for like NASA training stuff. It goes like bum, 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 ba-do-do-do,
right.
Bum,
that's a great one.
Bum, bum, ba-do-do-do. And then the end credits track, we bring all three of them together. We do the pulse comes from the work theme, the chord changes come from the ostinato, and then we use the melody more as the motive, at least from the main melody, becomes the melody, more or less. So we kind of bring all three themes together, and I love doing that. I love putting things together, and in a way, very different strategy, but the epilogue of La La Land, bringing it all together, and then the finale track of Babylon, totally different strategy and how they come together. But again, we had all these themes, we seeded them, they represented things, they represented people and ideas in the movie, and then they all come together in the end. We love doing that.
I just want for everyone to party forever.
When I first moved to LA, signs on all the doors said, no actors or dogs allowed. I changed that.
And now, y'all ready for something different?
I think in terms of pure creativity in film music, I haven't seen something as unique and sort of special in Babylon since like the Grand Budapest Hotel, in terms of mixing genre, blending things together, making it just 100% your own. Because a lot of people right off the bat, you know, they go in saying, oh, it's just 20s jazz, but it's so not 20s jazz. It is like house music meets AC/DC, meets like, you know, using instruments from that period, but at the same time, just going above and beyond to make it unique and different. So talk just a little bit about working with Damien to establish the sound world of Babylon, and also that main theme for Margot Robbie's character, which, you know, everyone's talking about, Voodoo Mama. It's great.
Yeah. Well, like you say, I mean, right from the beginning, Damien and I were on the same page about wanting to avoid 20s jazz. It's something we've heard a lot in movies, and it's just at least the jazz that we think of as 20s jazz, because it's recorded and it's what we've heard, it's kind of quaint, it's kind of gentle. It's Damien, like, you know, Damien did a lot of research. I can't say I really did, but I listened to the cliff notes of Damien's research, and one of the ideas he told me that was kind of inspiring was the music that we think of as 20s music, because it was recorded, was actually just a sliver of what was actually being played at the time. There was actually, you know, recording technology was very new. Very few people had access to it. Only a certain kind of music got to go into the studio and do it. So there was actually a more interesting music scene at parties, at clubs and underground clubs. And there was more music and a more interesting, vibrant music scene than what got immortalized on wax or whatever they recorded on. So we could imagine, based on, you know, some of the oral histories and some of what accounts of those crazy parties, what people were playing, what it sounded like. And so Damien told me, you know, we want these out of control parties where everybody's on drugs and you have these bands that are like going off the rails. And so we got to imagine a kind of wilder music than what we think of as the sort of cute swinging jazz from the 20s. That being said, we definitely did take liberties in terms of modernizing certain elements of it, bringing in elements of modern dance music
and everything.
Certainly the dance hi-hat is not something I don't think people were doing back then. The 4 on the floor is definitely possible, and probably there are good examples of that to really amp it up with 808s to make it pound as hard as ours.
Our guiding principle for music was to be rooted in the time, but to really push the edges of what we normally expect.
I was blown away by the script. And once we started talking about what the score could be, what if we use the instrumentation of a 1920s jazz band, but hinting at rock and roll and modern dance music?
That's, again, a liberty, but it's more about the feeling. We wanted to give the feeling of, you know, these sweaty parties where everybody's on amphetamines and to create the structural elements of modern dance music where you have drum breaks and risers that we do through horns and through saxes and other things, rather than electronic risers. You know, we do it with like horns rising and then throwing us into the next section into drops, bass drops, and the kick coming back in. So things that give us that sort of party, like pounding party feel of modern music, but that could definitely be believable enough coming from bands on those bandstands, more or less. Same goes with the score. Same goes with a lot of the cues that kind of drive us through different montages and whatnot.
How different is your process in terms of when you have an actual actor in the film who is diegetically playing your music?
So when you have somebody like Ryan Gosling who has to learn the piano, or Joe Vaughn who has to learn the trumpet, you have to pre-record that music. You have to go into the studio early and lay down those solos, lay down those tracks, so they have something to practice to, and so that we can play it on set. Joe Vaughn was in trumpet lessons with a great session player in town, Dan Fornero, and worked really, really hard and I was on set to kind of sort of supervise all things music to make sure that not just Jovan, but everybody in the band, you know, was playing the right part, was playing when they were supposed to be playing, not resting when they were supposed to be resting, to make sure it was all looking good. Jovan was like more on top of it than any of the professional musicians. I mean, everybody did a good job, but Jovan came in knowing his stuff. So that was a smooth process. Where it always gets a little weird is in post-production. You know, Ryan works so hard, Jovan works so hard and gets it perfect. And then in the edit, things change. Shots get moved, shots get rolled, things get out of sync. So most of it stays in sync, hopefully. I mean, it's always a priority for Damien to have it stay in sync and have it look good. That's why we go through and the actors go through the pains they do to learn it. But shit happens in post. So I then need to go back. And one of the weirdest puzzles I end up having to do in these movies is write new solos that fit what the fingers end up doing. So a shot gets moved or the timing gets switched, and now the timing is all off in the fingers. So I need to like write a new solo that will be fine musically, that will also fit. So I'm like balancing the needs between it's got to fit the timing of the fingers, but it's got to be like whatever the best thing I can do musically that also fits what's going on screen. And it's a really interesting puzzle to have to solve, but that's just part of it. Every one of these movies we go in and there are at least a few shots where I've had to like re-engineer the solo to fit what the edit has.
Yeah, I remember talking to Marius DeVries about what it was like doing that on Coda, because there was a bunch of diegetic music in there as well. So it's fascinating too, and also recording some of the music live on La La Land, like Audition and all that.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
There's no doubt in my mind this is a score for the ages.
Justin's music gives me chills. It's really, really beautiful.
So we want to build plateau.
Talk just a little bit about what it is like being Justin Hurwitz in 2023 and having made these set of films with Damien Chazelle, but looking towards the future with new stories to tell. And
well, that's a complicated question. I mean, people ask me after I won awards and stuff for La La Land, people ask me like, you know, your life must be so different. How have things changed? And I would always say like, I hope things don't change, because if I work less hard, or I feel a little more like satisfied, or I like don't get pushed as hard by the people around me, that's a bad thing. I don't think my work will be as good. So I would say that in 2017, and I do feel like so much the same. I mean, certainly there are things in my life that are different after success, but when it comes to doing the work, I think I stuck to what I said I was going to, which is to work in the same way, work as hard. Damien certainly pushes me as hard, which I welcome. I mean, I rely so much on Damien driving me, saying no until I get that yes, helping me find my best material. Because I have a lot of okay ideas, or bad ideas, or very good but not quite good enough ideas before I get to that winner. And I need Damien. I so rely on Damien to guide me through that process. And he hasn't gotten any less relentless in his search for what I need to do. So that's good. He's kept me, you know, honest.
Well, and I think the brilliance of your collaboration is that you're constantly pushing each other. Every single film that you guys have done together, it just seems like you are just bouncing, you know, off of each other's creativity, and it creates something every time that is just so truly special. So I just have to say that you're just doing amazing things. And I have one last story that leads into the last question. But in 2016, I was 16 years old. I saw La La Land maybe 4 or 5 times in theaters. And I remember the feeling of seeing this young guy win the Oscar for Best Original Score, and looking up and saying like, wow, like that guy looks so young, and he's winning this award. That's amazing. So it was a huge inspiration boost for me. So I'm curious for all the people out there.
I can't believe you're doing this podcast. You're like, what, 23?
I'm 22.
22?
22, yeah. Thank you. But anyways, so all the people that look at what you've done and are inspired by it and love your music, but also are inspired by what you've been able to do at such a relatively young age, what would you say to the fools out there who dream in real life?
You should be giving this lesson. I mean, I was 32 when I got that Oscar. You're doing this at 22.
Give me a break.
You got a whole decade to catch up. But what I would say is do what you love. I know a lot of people say that, but like something like a lesson my parents taught me when I was young is just whatever you love. If you really, really love it, you'll find a way to be successful at it. Even if it's like such a field that doesn't seem like you can be. Like, I remember my dad at one point, he was like, if you love surfing, and I've never surfed, but he was just like, if you love surfing, you'll find a way to be successful. You won't necessarily be a professional surfer, but you'll like design surfboards, or you'll do something. If you really love something, you will find a way to make a life out of it. And music was the thing I loved. And and not just music, but the area of music that I went into. I mean, I've told this story before, but I was taking piano lessons, and I was okay at it, but I never loved it. And then once I started writing my own music, it was just like something happened. I was like, oh, this is addictive in a way that nothing else is. Like, just time disappears when I'm writing music. So I recognize this is the thing I love, and for everybody it's something different. And I hope people are just attuned to the things they love, that they try different things. I mentioned at the Golden Globes that we need to sort of make sure that public schools have music classes and all sorts of opportunities, because people are never going to find the thing that they love if they never have a chance to try it. I think kids need to be able to try different things. Try a sport, try an instrument, try a different instrument, try drawing, try science, try whatever, until you find that thing that's just, ooh, I love this. And if you love it, just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it and just you'll find a way to make a life out of it. And so I would say that try a lot of different things and be attuned to what is really sparking your passion.
A rush,
A glance,
a touch,
a dance,
a look in somebody's eyes, to light up the skies, to open the world and send it reeling. A voice that says I'll be here and you'll be alright.
And then just keep going with it and try to keep learning. That's getting back to what we talked about earlier. I'm still going to YouTube all the time. I'm still reading books. I'm still trying to get better and better and better. So no matter where you are in that process of learning your passion, just constantly try to be learning and getting better. And it's never stop doing that. It's a never ending process. Just keep going with it.
I love it. And you've also shown that relationships are another key to everything, is being able to form amazing collaborative relationships with people that you can really jive with. So,
Yeah.
Justin, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And seriously, congratulations on everything. You are hugely inspirational, and I cannot wait to see like where your career goes off to at this point.
Thank you, Ashton. I appreciate it.
Alrighty, take care.
Great talking with you.
It's the most magical place in the world.